Hi, I'm Grace Judson, and I am here today to talk to you about something that is of significant concern to many leaders, especially CEOs and other members of the C-suite. And that is the question of leadership and the leadership gap within your organization. Now, when I do this presentation in front of a group rather than here on video, I always ask, by a show of hands, how many of you think that you might have a leadership gap? And we'll get into defining exactly what that is in a minute. You might have a leadership gap within your organization. And in every case, the majority of the people raise their hands. Yes, they do think that they might have a leadership gap in their organization. So clearly, I can't see if you have your hand raised, but if you would just take a moment to think about this, do you feel as if there is, however we're going to define it, a gap in your organization in terms of where your leadership needs to be and where they actually are? Now, I'm going to share my screen here in a minute so that you can see some visuals that have to do with this. And what we're going to talk about here is bridging the leadership gap, what it is, what it's comprised of, what the components are, and how we can actually begin to close that gap. But the first question really is, what is this thing that we're calling, or I'm calling, the leadership gap? Well, I see it as being made up of three things. And the first is the question of bench strength. Okay, what's bench strength? Bench strength is the capacity of an organization to promote leaders from within into increasingly senior levels and senior roles. Now, the reason this is a significant question right now is because of two things. One, the baby boomers, after many years of crying wolf, actually are beginning to retire and have been retiring in ever-increasing numbers. This means that at the senior levels and mid-management levels of our organizations, there has been an increasing pace of exits, people retiring. The flip side of this is that although since the recession, companies have basically gotten very complacent. HR leadership, hiring managers have gotten complacent because after the recession, and for many years after the recession, it's been true that it's been pretty darn easy to fill pretty much any role, any talent that you're looking for, any skill that you're looking for, any qualities in general that you're looking for at any level that you might need from an external hire. Setting aside the question that that can still be costly, but in the last year or so, that has gotten increasingly more difficult as the job market has tightened more and more, which just makes it that much more costly and makes it that much more difficult to find the kind of person that you really want to bring into your organization. So bench strength is twofold here. One is we have an increasing need to have quality people ready and prepared to step into increasing levels of leadership role, and we have a corresponding decrease in the availability of this type of person from outside the organization. So we need that strong internal bench strength. In fact, we need it to the extent that 65% of CEOs view this as their current top challenge in their organizations. That's a pretty strong statement, especially when you look at the second statistic there, which is that 60% of that 65%, so the vast majority of them, believe that they are not doing enough to meet this challenge of bench strength. So that's the first thing. Compounding this issue is a report I saw recently from our friends at Gallup, the ginormous research firm, that out of any group of 10 people, only one of them actually has the innate talent to become a good leader and manager. They go on to say in this report that came out relatively recently that 2 of the remaining 9 have enough innate talent to be developed into good leaders. Now, this does require that we buy into the belief that the old standby principle that leaders are born, not made, which I'm not quite sure I 100% agree with, but this is Gallup, and they've got a lot of credibility. And so that leaves us with this as our pool of potential leaders. But as they point out, we don't necessarily promote based on these factors of talent for leadership. We promote based on the examples that somebody has given us of their ability to perform at an individual level. I'm going to say more about that later, but just recognize that this is a big piece of the leadership gap, and it is part of what goes up to making this problem of leadership bench strength. So the next thing, when I look at this whole question of bench strength as being the first item, and now we're moving on to the second, when I did an informal survey of executive leaders whom I know and middle managers that I know and fellow executive coaches, I asked them a very open-ended question, and I did have an expectation. We always have a theory, right? I did have an expectation of the answer that I was going to get. The answer that I got was unanimous from all of the people that I asked, and it was not the answer that I expected to get. So what was the question? The question was, what do you see as the single biggest challenge for people who have been promoted out of the individual contribution role and into their first leadership and management role? I'll give you a moment to think about what your answer is and see if you agree with them. It was strategic thinking. And when I thought about this, I was like I said, this wasn't what I expected, but I was like, oh, yeah, this makes complete sense, because as I mentioned a second ago, these people who've been promoted out of the individual contribution role into a leadership and management role have been consistently evaluated, rewarded, or chastised upon their ability to complete tasks, because that really is what the individual contribution role is all about. You give me a task, I do it. You give me increasingly challenging tasks and increasingly higher impact and greater responsibility in the tasks that you give me, but it's still about the task. And when you are task focused, you are not thinking strategically. Then we promote these people, we throw them in the deep end of leadership and expect them to be able to think strategically, but they probably don't even know what strategy actually is at this point in their career. So yeah, this is a significant challenge. And I consider this to be the second of the three pieces, components of the leadership gap. What is the third? The third has to do with what I expected these people to say and what the individual leaders, these fledgling leaders, would tell me. And that, let's look at some statistics on that. First off, 69% of managers at all levels surveyed said that at one point or another, they don't feel comfortable for various reasons communicating with their employees. I would be willing to bet that if we reduced that pool to just those newly fledged managers and leaders, that would be a whole lot closer to 100%. Meanwhile, Gallup again tells us that 67% of the US workforce is disengaged. We can talk for a lot longer than we have here about what that actually means for the organizations that they work for. And a Harris Interactive poll says that only 13% of employees believe that their management communicates well, effectively with them, which means that 87% of them believe that their management does not communicate well. Now, as far as I have been able to locate, doesn't mean it's not out there, and if you know of one, please let me know. There is no survey or study done that correlates these three things. But I cannot believe that they are not related to each other. I cannot believe that the disengagement factor is not related to communication, at least in part. Now, I can give you a bunch more statistics about why, as I said earlier, disengagement is not a good thing. You probably know most of them, and we don't have time to go into them here. But what I will say is that once again, we have taken people who were just individual contributors a few days ago and put them in a role where they are now managing and leading the people that they essentially were peers of a few days ago. And it is small wonder that they struggle to inspire, motivate, offer feedback, whether positive or corrective, delegate, all of those things that go into being an effective manager and leader, and that require a certain type of communication skill that they have never been taught. Again, we're throwing them in at the deep end and not giving them the support that they need. So here we have the three components of the leadership gap. Bench strength within the organization, strategic thinking versus task orientation, and the ability to communicate in the ways that a manager and leader needs to do. Okay, so what do we do with this? All right, let's look at what we do with this. First off, although, as I said at the beginning, every organization with a leadership gap, these three components play a part to a greater or lesser degree. Nonetheless, of course, every organization is also unique. So the first thing we need to do is evaluate what's going on within your specific organization. What is happening? Where, to what extent do each of these three components play a part, and what other components may there be that are specific to what's happening for you? And then we need to create a plan for how to address all of that. Simple, strategic process, right? Okay, great. The next thing we need to do as part of that plan is teach the essential workplace skills that begin with strategic thinking and effective communication as a manager and leader. There are going to be others. Again, that's where the uniqueness of your situation comes in. But we have to be able to teach these individuals who have just gotten into leadership, not wait until they've been there for a while. Because here's another statistic for you. 60% of new leaders fail in their first year. What does that imply in terms of the projects they lead, the people they lead, the impact that they have above and beyond the fact that now you've had somebody in this role that you either have to demote or fire altogether and replace, and all the costs involved in that. So we have to teach them when they need this support right out of the gate. And then I think we can all relate to this. I think we've all had this experience where we have gone to a conference or read a book or watched a video like this or gone to a workshop. We get back to our desk, great ideas, we love them, we can't wait to implement them, and then it's like, how do we do this again? How do we make this work in our specific environment? So we have to coach people. It's not enough just to teach concepts. You have to give them guidance and support in how to implement those concepts at what my husband calls gain speed, in the moment, in the situations that they encounter every day. We have to coach them to competence. So those are the three aspects of how you begin to close the leadership gap. Evaluate and plan, teach the essential skills that they need in order to be successful and in order for your organization to be successful, and then coach them to being competent in how they actually apply those skills. The benefits, I mean, I could go on for days about the benefits. I could have any number of slides here that give you the benefits, but essentially, when you have high-performing, happy teams, and yes, this is not just a fluff factor, they have shown that when organizations who score in the top quartile of employee engagement outperform organizations that score in the bottom quartile by 147%. Gallup again. So you get successful projects. Dare I say it, you may even get strategic initiatives that meet or even beat their objectives. Might even come in under budget. Who knows? And of course, you have great leadership bench strength. You have higher productivity, on and on and on. The costs are tremendous when you have failing leaders. Project delays, project failures, budget overruns, disengaged workforce. I've already given you a few statistics about what happens when your workforce is disengaged, but there are also questions of accidents, absenteeism, on and on. And the cost of recruiting, hiring, and training are huge. They are much higher than most people estimate. Yeah, I mean, again, I could go on for a long time. I'm restraining myself because I want this to be short. But contact me if you want to know more about this, because it's much more than you think it is. So, in fact, when we talk about contact me, There is a handout that goes into this in more detail. You can get it at that URL that is on your screen. I would love to talk to you about this. So send me an email, put a comment. If this is posted somewhere and you're seeing it on social media somewhere, put a comment. Get the handout. The handout also includes some emails that will come to you that will describe more things that you can do. And in fact, we'll provide a costing worksheet that will give you an example of just how expensive this stuff really actually is. Okay, that is it. Thank you for listening. And I hope that you take action and do what you can to close the leadership gap in your organization. Bye.